Hello, this is Kimon Onuma from Onuma Inc. Welcome to today's webinar. We sent this note out yesterday as a new theme, BIM Babble. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today. This is the third in a series of webinars about the program to BIM. Today's focus is going to be on manufacturers' objects, data, and BIM. And the reason we put the Babble slide up is we know there's a lot of technical stuff happening in the background to make this stuff work, and there's a lot of standards and different formats. How do we, as an industry, make it easier for the end users, for the different stakeholders that are using this data in their projects to work with the information, whether it's in a database, in a model, in an object. And we've assembled a great panel today. We have Doug Bevel from BIM Object, North America President. BIM Object is doing some really amazing things with objects in the cloud. They've also had some really interesting announcements recently about being the exclusive distributor for Autodesk Seek in North America, I believe. And Doug will talk about a little bit about what BIM Object is doing in relation to the program to BIM. Mike Knaw from Foxblocks is going to be a manufacturer that actually manufactures products. And he has been doing some really interesting things with products and getting them into BIM and connecting data. And he'll give us his perspective of what he's hearing about this program to BIM series and what the owners are wishing to do with the data and what the opportunities are for manufacturers and the industry. My name is Kimon Onuma from Onuma Inc. We're also from Thought Leadership. I'm the Thought Leadership Chair of the Building Smart Alliance from the National Institute of Building Sciences. We've been really promoting a lot about standards, obviously in the industry, and a lot of other new things that are happening in Building Smart Alliance this year. Jill Worley from Atania Inc. Atania is doing some very interesting things relating to data and objects for the medical planning and objects in medical planning and healthcare design. So she'll be talking. So great, so let's get going. This is a third in the series of webinars. We've had a very busy month. Every week we've been having a webinar with a different focus, but all kind of honing back in on how do we get data moving across the life cycle, all the way from the owner's perspective on through to design, construction, and operation. We're getting great support, and we thank the Asset Leadership Network for supporting this series of webinars, as well as a Building Smart Alliance. And these webinars are being sponsored by Onuma Inc. and BIMstorm. So let's recap a little bit from what we heard from the owners. And everybody that's on the webinar today, if you have not seen the previous 3 webinars, you will get a link to the video, which you can watch if you'd like. But what we heard from the owners is they want to start now. They have a lot of needs in their facilities design and construction and operation. They want to start with something simple. We're calling it minimum viable BIM. What is the simplest thing they can start with that can help them today, not 5 years from now? They want to have standards-driven methods to use their information in any program and keep it neutral. It's very important to not get trapped in a proprietary format. And they want to test their processes before they use them live in a sandbox environment. So Jim Dieter, the Executive Director of Asset Leadership Network, describes it this way. You can divide assets into people, money, and stuff. A lot of resources are spent on managing people and finances, but there isn't as much effort into managing stuff. So we're talking about stuff, essentially, the stuff that goes into a building, the design and construction of the building, the equipment in the building, the people in the building, the other assets, even movable assets like fleet and equipment. And that stuff, how can we become more efficient at managing it? And Renee Tejan from the VA says a medical facility is the largest piece of medical equipment that the VA owns, and everything is interconnected. If you can't manage your facility and equipment, building and assets and portfolio well, then you're not really serving your customers. And there's a lot of challenges, obviously, with a lot of large owners and even smaller owners of how do we do this. You're going to be hearing a lot about healthcare facilities today, but if you replace the word healthcare with anything in here, it really applies across the board. This is not exclusive to healthcare. It's not exclusive to large facilities. It's really a method to move data efficiently throughout the life cycle and all the different stakeholders. So faster access to care is the goal of VA, and having good data, a good foundation, and we describe it as Legos, which you'll hear later on, about why we call these Legos, that plug together and help an owner to work with their data about facilities and assets. The National Institute of Building Sciences and Building Smart Alliance put out a journal for Building Sciences journal from NIBS. This month's journal is available free online, and John Roach, a Thought Leadership Vice Chair, wrote a great article about the center of the universe is lonely. It's about collaborative technologies, and these two diagrams on the left pretty well sum up what we're going to be talking about today as well too. If you look at the red, yellow, and green diagrams on the right, if you have proprietary or closed systems, it becomes a very lonely kind of a place. That's basically what John's point is, that you can't move data outside of that circle. You create an infrastructure, different tools and applications all built around that. But then if you want to collaborate or plug something else into it, you're very limited. Where if you go to the diagram on the left and you think in terms of a more neutral way of services and data and access that can be plugged and played together, then owners can start sharing resources and sharing the same tools. And the trend has been in the industry to move towards the cloud, to move towards services-oriented architecture, to move data into a neutral format that any application can plug into and use. And that's where the standards development are critical for the industry. So the key questions today is, what is big data and big BIM? What's the difference between electronic documents and file exchanges? In other words, for objects, and today in particular objects and data, instead of moving data and exporting it from one application, importing to the next, what if we lived in a world where we can access the data at the same time in any application you're working with? And are we waiting for the standard or the perfect IFC? There's a lot of great standards out there that can be used today. We don't have to wait for it to be perfect, and there's a way to start with a minimum viable BIM to actually start giving value back to the owners for the full life cycle. And what can the industry do for owners today? We've covered this in previous webinars as well, but today's focus on the Lifecycle Playbook. We have the Facilities and Assets Lifecycle Playbook, where we instructed the owners on number 1, 2, and 3, for example, gather your data into a place that you can find the authoritative source. Don't have it scattered around PDFs and Excels and Word documents or in people's heads. If you have a list of things that you call spaces and equipment, if you make an authoritative source list and even just park it even on Google Docs and mandate the use of that data internally in your organization, number 5, then you can start talking in a consistent way internally about what your needs are, and you can start interacting with the industry, and that's where number 7, 8, and 9 come in. There's ways to start building applications and object libraries and ecosystems around that data that these owners now have put in a place that is accessible. So the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Department of Defense, Defense Health Agency, have data that's on the web in scattered formats and different formats, and they moved. There was a series of projects that took their space and equipment planning standards and moved it into the cloud, out from a closed system into an open ecosystem, described as Legos. If you park your data in a secure and accessible way, the green Lego at the bottom, you have a blue layer that just defines the rules of how you can get to their data. Then you can start plugging applications, existing applications, or even future applications on top of that, including the BIM objects that we're talking about in today's session. So new functionality starts to develop on top of this because you have a structure, an ecosystem in place that you don't have to keep on replicating. You start sharing the resources and have consistent naming and numbering standards, for example, for pieces of equipment. If the VA, for example, says, here's a type of equipment we use as an organization, and you say, well, we want to be able to work with an Atania type group that has a medical equipment database for 40,000 pieces of product information. If they have the same IDs as we do, then we can start saying, okay, what are the options we have today? Or what manufacturers are out there that can actually help guide the design and construction of facilities to make them more secure or more resilient. Foxblocks is going to be talking about those objects and their products and how they plug into this ecosystem. And then BIM objects having a consistent way on the cloud as well to manage data and objects. A bunch of static object libraries on the web, they're connected to a database and can maintain and manage them over time. It's huge, big data about objects on the web. So this is very much in alignment with White House directives about opening up government data and making it accessible. It's not a free-for-all. It's a secure environment, but it's also made open and accessible depending on who you are and what you need to do with it. And the driver for all this is we want to be able to get to our data on any device that we use. We don't want to be limited to a single application or even a single device. We don't want to be tethered to the desktop. We want to be mobile. We want to be able to pick up information wherever we are. And the way to do this, we feel, is to look at it from a minimum viable BIM approach. What's the minimum amount of data in that Lego structure to start tying these things together? We know there's a lot of complex and amazing things happening with BIM, but if we keep it simple, what's possible to do today with that data? So today we're talking about objects and components, equipment, whatever you want to call it. In the steps to BIM or program to BIM approach, this is an example from VA that's actually live already. They have their objects cataloged. They have IDs on all of the 2,000 different types of objects that go into a healthcare facility. They're not product specific because from an owner's perspective, they're saying we need this functionality in a dental exam room. We need a light. This is the number of the light. This is the type of functionality, the amount of lumens we need in it. But beyond that, we know there are manufacturers that can support that need. But we want to be able to consistently communicate that with the architects and engineers and planners out there and be able to share it in a consistent way. That's the life cycle playbook we talked about earlier. They've gone all the way up to number 5 and said, okay, here's where you can access our data. And it's really as simple as this from a minimum viable BIM approach. This is a list of their room types. They have thousands of room types, dental exam room, offices, the size of the room, the recommended size of the room, and other attributes associated with it. But the green boxes are the minimum pieces of information that you need. And the same thing with equipment. So, okay, here's the 2,000 pieces of equipment, the lights and the chairs and the offices and the workstations, all that catalog. And having a consistent naming, this seems very simplistic, but most owners have not gotten to this point. If you have scattered information around, then you can't consistently say, once we have this in place, we can start defining the requirements for a room. And then also the level of, the geometry levels of detail or the level of development was also defined as far as you can even start with a block that says here's a chair, and then, or a 2D graphic of it, or if you go to level of development or level of detail C, we call it a generic chair. We're not saying what the manufacturer is, but then when the design starts going, then you start getting into a higher level, and this is what Doug from BIM Objects is going to be talking about as well. So this structure for the steps to BIM for VA is already in place, is already live, is already accessible. Parts of it are 100% public to the web, because why this is important is if this owner says, here's the 2,000 types of equipment we have, and we have industry saying, like Atania saying, well, here's the equipment that we have. If they align the IDs and the numbers, all of a sudden you have a way to communicate with other tools in a very simple way. Even though Atania has hundreds of other attributes about that equipment, we just need to align the basic IDs with that, and then you can start working with this data. Okay, and then the other Lego pieces that we're talking about today are the BIM object connection to this. Last week we had Revit demonstrated by AECOM. Matt Anderley from AECOM demonstrated this actually functioning in a pilot project that was done with VA to test the functionality of steps to BIM. And today we'll show a little bit more about the other tools like ArchiCAD, SketchUp, BIM Object, and Atania, also plugging into and Onuma as well too. So let's do a little live demo here. The last few weeks we also demonstrated a little bit of this, but we want to show a little bit more technical aspects of it. Just for today's session, it's about the data and the objects inside it in the steps to BIM process. So let's go to stepstobim.org. And on this site, anybody can get to it if you go stepstobim.org. There's information about the data and web services that are available. So there's a web service, for example, of all the equipment that BA and DoD use. Again, we're talking about government agencies here. We're talking about healthcare facilities. But if you replace the names here, the same exact approach would be viable for any type of building. So at the bottom of the page, there are APIs for these web services. So if you're a developer or have product information, you can actually link to this. You can actually get to the what's called the master tables, which is essentially their rules of how their spaces and equipment are configured. These are all web services. And then there are also free simple utilities that you can use to say, okay, I want to call up a typical room type. I'm going to call up that dental exam room. Their catalog down below, and basically this is hitting live from this page to the SEPS and the 1691, what's called the Equipment Database web services, and it builds a space on the fly of that room type. And the same thing happens with the department. I can say I want to call up an entire department, not a single space, but I want to call up, these are all the VA standard spaces and equipment for a dental exam room, for example. Again, call that up, and we pull it up, and it builds it on the fly again too. So I get an email, and the email says you have a room you just called up. This is live. I'm not showing slides. This is actually live. So I pull it up, and it pulls up that exam room that we just called up. So here's the exam room coming into a web browser. Simple interface. Again, you can do stuff with it. You can start creating reports, and you'll notice that some of the furniture is not laid out in the room. It's basically, here's the type of equipment that needs to go in this room, but this particular one actually has a layout. So it actually has a configuration of the recommended layout of that space with the data. So you can try this on your own and see how that works. Okay, so let's continue on here. This is what we just showed, the live demo of that. And now we'll go into the next section to get the different vendors and manufacturers on board to show what they're doing with it. So these Lego pieces that are plugging into this ecosystem now, I just showed one utility, the one in the middle there. We're going to go into BIM object. Doug next to talk about BIM objects and what they did with this. But where we started with this with these owners is they had a catalog of objects in Revit. We worked with Trimble SketchUp, and they converted it to SketchUp as well. BIM object came in and said, okay, we can align our IDs and the objects, and we can actually catalog them and put them on our server as well. So Doug, if you're ready to go, we'd like you to explain a little bit of what you're doing and what BIM object does with this type of data.
Thanks, Kimon. Well, first of all, let me thank everyone thank Kimon and the team for inviting the BIM object to be part of this. It's real exciting. We're also honored to be, I wanted to mention, hosting the SEPS to BIM data on BIM object. And there's a lot of exciting things happening in the BIM space, and BIM object is at the forefront of leading a lot of that effort. Just real quick, BIM object was started 5 years ago by a gentleman in Sweden by the name of Stefan Larsson, and we are now traded on the NASDAQ in Sweden and for about the last 2 years. The most recently, one of the honors we've had, other than hosting SEPS to BIM being one of those, is that we've been asked by Autodesk to partner with them in marketing and selling and servicing their Seek platform going forward. That just happened literally on the AIA floor. We were all done that during the show. So the vision of BIM object is, I'm going to use a term that I'm stealing from Kimon yesterday, which was, I thought, the most powerful statement, is to try to take the babble out of BIM. My background is in building product. I was a building product executive for several years and was in the middle of the BIM storm, so to speak. And when I was recruited by BIM object last year and shown what they were capable of doing with basically turning, instead of just building objects for building product manufacturers, but putting metadata in the cloud and making it available across all BIM platforms, including SketchUp and AutoCAD, and also in short order would be coming out with an app for Revit MEP. But this is an important part. Where I really think we help the industry is we can help the designer in the early stages with lighter objects rather than any of the BIM platforms, the CAD platforms, and go through the bid process onto facilities management. That's really what I saw in this, and also our ability to deliver. We can deliver to Kimon, for example, who actually downloaded his objects so that he can see, or any manufacturer can see who has downloaded those objects. This is a portal that where you can see the SIPs to BIM. This is a dental chair where the designer can download right from this. They can contact the manufacturer from this page. So we're creating a social media environment for the industry. Okay. This slide I put together actually last night. I wanted to update the industry. So my background is construction economics. That's a long story. But what I've done here is shown that 15% of total construction in 2015, and this is pretty consistent from year to year, even before the recession, is 15 to 17% of total architectural construction is healthcare. As most segments after 2008, it took a hit. As you can see in the pie chart showing the share of education. Education always leads the construction spending segment in architectural, and it's normally between 30 and 38% of total construction, with a split of about 70% K through 12 and 30% universities. As you can see in the right graph, we're seeing an upward trend in healthcare construction. This is being driven by two things. One, there's the Affordable Health Care Act is driving more customers to this space. Also, the baby boomers are starting to reach the age where they do need more health care, and healthcare spending is going up. And also the industry is changing quite a bit, so that hospitals and other healthcare facilities need to be constructed differently in more campus-oriented type environments. Okay, again, this is showing when a designer comes into our system, they can actually look at the BIM, and in this case, they can download this light object in design, and in early design, just to put together the outline of the building, and then again, as Kimo said, as you move through the process, you can go into heavier models to where you want to pick the actual manufacturer. That can all be done in BIM object. Kimo, are you there?
Yes, and you also have different formats as well too, right? You have ArchiCAD, Revit, SketchUp, IFC.
Well, as I said earlier, we have all the formats.
Right.
We have virtually all the BIM formats, as well as, again, as you said, IFC. They're and also Kobe compatible, and also CAD and SketchUp.
Right. And actually, this is live now. I'm just showing it on an iPad here, but the reason you guys were able to align is because you aligned with that ID, D3320, and we share the objects, and the data and the background is different from a database. So a designer could then, in the future, if they wanted to find a chair that's equivalent to this in theory, then you could say, okay, here's another manufacturer that has three different types of chairs that would match this. So a lot of really great potential here, and I really appreciate, Doug, you explaining that to us, and we'll go into a question and answer after we get the, or discussion after we get the other presenters finished here as well too.
Thanks, Kimo.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move along. So that was, again, the fact that the data is available on the web services from SEPs to BIM and the 1691 equipment, this owner declaring here's what we call our equipment and making it accessible. Not only declaring and putting it in a PDF or circulating it as an Excel file, but saying here's the web service where you can actually see what our thoughts are about equipment, because our requirements change on a constant basis. Even an Excel file or even a PDF is going to be out of date the minute they publish it, but having it accessible in real time has changed everything, because then other products can now link into it. And the next one we're going to talk about is Atania. And the interesting thing about Atania is not a BIM application, yet it is in many ways. It has data about equipment. There is no graphical interface other than lists and some reports, but linking steps to BIM to Atania and keeping the IDs in sync, all of a sudden the 10 attributes about that chair that VA says, well, we need a dental chair, and here are the 10 things about this dental chair. Atania can come back and say, well, here's 30 different dental chairs, and there's a couple hundred attributes, additional attributes about these chairs. The medical planner could be making decisions in Atania at the same time as the architect, who's using other BIM applications, can see those decisions without even being an Atania user. So I, as an architect, for example, could say, okay, I'll move this chair around, or how much space do we have around this chair? What's the electrical requirements for this chair? I can pull up pieces of data. This is the minimum BIM again. I don't need the entire Atania database, but I need pieces of it. In the opposite direction, Atania doesn't necessarily need to see the BIM, but it would be nice now that the BIM is available to say, well, how does this fit in? So there's a lot of really interesting use cases that developed right off the bat from this. And Jill is going to explain that. So Jill, if you're ready to go, I'll pass the mic to you, and you'll take off from there.
I am ready to go. Thank you, Kimon.
Great.
So a little bit about Atania. We are actually celebrating 15 years of being a web-based service for the Atania community. I've been with Atania 12 of those years, and I've got 20 years out in the proverbial field. We really support a specific section of the planning, design, build, construction phase, which is the actual physical planning and specification of the final equipment, the procurement, as well as the deployment and the delivery of it. So for myself, I'm really excited about the work we've been doing with Onuma, in particular over the past year or so, initially with the VA, with the SEP system, to really look at ways to integrating those processes. Because I've spent so much time in the industry, I remember the days when many of these processes were still paper. So to see them move to automated means, to desktop means, to web-based means, to integrated means, and now the power of APIs allowing these seemingly disparate systems to start bridging and connecting data has been a very exciting evolution for us to be part of. So let's move to the next slide. And let's go ahead and push through for the bullet points there. So what exactly is Atania? We've talked about a lot of different pieces to this ecosystem, and Atania is kind of finding ourselves very strategically in the center of many of these ecosystem discussions. We specifically are a host and a moderator of multiple applications that specifically do serve healthcare, and healthcare capital equipment planning in particular. That's both in the construction as well as in the routine planning world. Like Kimon said, many of the things we're talking about today, we strategically are also looking about expanding that out beyond just healthcare, and many of these processes and principles could apply to other related construction industries. We're 100% cloud-based, and we actually have $37 billion in capital equipment actively being planned today. And many of those members in our community are very excited about BIM and about being able to integrate the data that they manage within Atania applications with their design tools, such as the BIM and the Onuma-related resources. Most of that business is here in the U.S., but we are international as well. So that's another inherent challenge we've been looking at in recent years, is how to internationalize much of the data we do, specifically as it applies to this group. What do you do about imperial versus metric? So that's an element of information that we actually use in our database, and they have the ability to toggle between metric and imperial type references. So we can push the bullet points through for this one as well. So who exactly is the Atania community? They're actually the healthcare providers themselves. We do provide licensing to healthcare systems that have in-house construction, design, and facilities groups that want to manage the processes and, more importantly, control the data or the standardization of that data internally. We also have facilitators, being design, build, construction firms, architectural firms, equipment planning firms, anyone who's involved with the planning of that equipment post-design, and when it becomes appropriate to start planning it more specifically with the clinical stakeholders, they're using our resources. What makes our content interesting as we start showing you some of the content that we manage is that the community helps us maintain that content. So we actually partner also with groups, or what some folks refer to as GPOs, group purchasing organizations. A lot of name changes here, but Intelair, which was previously Amerinet, Vizient, which was previously MedAssets, and Novation, as well as Premier, also help us in maintaining the data and maintaining the timeliness of some of that data in our particular product catalog. We also work directly with the manufacturers and suppliers. We actually have a supplier program that ensures that the data that we're maintaining in our system, and ultimately what's feeding back into the BIM modeling resources, is as up-to-date and accurate as possible, and that we're getting information on new technologies as quickly and as efficiently as possible. We also have service provider relationships, such as our relationship with Onuma, We are already looking at many different aspects of creating APIs and directly integrating our data, not only in the pre-build processes such as design, but also some of those post-processes such as deployment processes, procurement processes, and even ultimately asset management processes. So what is our core content? And we've been talking about that a little bit. We're going to show you some of that here in a moment. Our core product is built around a product catalog. That catalog has over 47,000 comprehensively documented equipment, FF&E type products. Each of those is going to have at least 100 different field attributes tied to any given record, whether it's pricing or technical detail. We cover 35 different categories from 2,500 different suppliers. That is a very strong number, and it may actually seem understated, but that is 15 years of solid research and collaboration with the Atania community to build up 47 very solid records for our clients to use. What's also important to note about Atania is that we actually normalize that data. We have a standardized nomenclature. Our customers can customize it and create some custom labels, but for the most part, that normalization is what allows our tool to quickly aggregate and summarize and report out information that's being planned on the project in order to make larger scale strategic decisions. It is both community and supplier moderated, so our Atania community, being the customers themselves, can contribute content to that catalog. Our suppliers contribute, our GPO partners also contribute content, as well as the manufacturers themselves. We all work collectively in our own little microcosm of that larger ecosystem to make sure that everybody's using the best possible data. Within our system, we also have room templates, and this is another interesting variable to the discussion in that we maintain those templates with typical room equipment lists. We don't do layouts per se, and that's why we're excited about the potential integration with Enuma, but these lists provide you a shopping list per se or a checklist of the items that typically should be found in those rooms, very similar to what the SEPs to BIM system has done on the SEP side for the VA. We actually provide that for our customers out in the commercial market. We also can customize those for suppliers, and we also have contextual details such as contract detail and analytical detail from some of our other business partners such as ECRI and MD Byline. So next slide. So we're going to go into the live site here in just a moment. I'm going to show you this in more detail, but this is the first point in our planning tool in particular. It's used for construction projects in particular about some of the data that we are maintaining within the system. We actually maintain the source documents from the manufacturer for that, being data sheets, planning guides, or installation guides. And we also extrapolate that information into our database, normalize it so that we can actually generate technical reports both within our system, but we also normalize that data so that when we build APIs such as what we've done with Enuma, we're getting clean, consistent data each and every time. So the future of capital, this may or may not be consistent with the design side, but what we're seeing from within our community is that analytics are really becoming more and more important, and that's part of the value of us being able to normalize our data, is that being able to look at information strategically during the procurement process in particular, as well as the deployment, and being able to identify the opportunities to optimize spending, to streamline specifications, and ultimately to streamline the deployment and the installation processes by normalizing and standardizing as much of those equipment items that are being procured for projects as possible. Also utilizing contracts. The national GPO contracts that I mentioned are very important in our particular market because that's going to provide additional pricing incentives to the members of those particular GPOs, but they also need to have visibility to that, and that's something we provide for them within our database. Also standards controls. It's all about standardized dating to streamline processes, increase aggregation of capital spend from particular sources or particular vendors, and optimizing the dollars that they're spending in these projects. And also being able to anticipate that demand by category or manufacturer, being able to forecast it, how far out our particular projects, we're going to track that. So what we're looking at here is just a basic flow chart of where Atania falls within the larger ecosystem. This is specific to our relationship with Enuma in particular, but you can see that Atania is kind of at the center of that, kind of feeding our content in particular out to some of these other resources. The product detail in particular, especially the dimensional detail, allows us to create the object. Is being fed back into Enuma, and we've got real-time communication from that, and it shows some of the other relationships that we have on the other end of procurement and deployment where we also integrate. So we're going to take just a moment here to connect live into the Atania database so I can show you what some of that connectivity looks like. So what we're looking at is the Atania product called Plan. This is our construction-based tool. What we've done previously with Anuma as part of our test cases, we've actually built out a sample clinic. And so with that clinic, what we're able to do is in a very flat file mode, see which departments are in the project and ultimately which rooms. Now, for this particular exercise, when we originally started this process, these templates actually originated from the SEPS to BIM system. So these are VA standards and typical templates that were transported or exported into the Atania system, and then we were able to map that information and create the real-time connectivity to it, and ultimately an API that allows the plan system to update the corresponding templates back in Anuma, which Kimon's going to show you shortly. How we integrate it is that we simply use what are called GUIDs. So through the SEPS system, we have GUIDs at the project level is the first layer of integration and connectivity, and then what will happen here is that as we drill into particular departments, there's going to be an additional identifier to distinguish from one department to the next. So as I have my department here, the clinic itself is going to have its own GUID to identify that correlation. When we come down to the room level, and I'm going to come down one more level here. I apologize here. Getting a little bit of a lag here with my web connection. Let me get one more level down. All right, I'm going to bypass that level, but we do have a GUID, again, similar to the department level that we're seeing here. We would subsequently see a GUID at the room level. Once we get into the room level, within our system, the planner is constantly managing this data, reviewing it with stakeholders, changing specifications as needs, demands, and preferences from the clinical stakeholders change throughout the project. If I come down a particular item, that item also is going to have its own GUID as well. Actually, let me jump over to the exam light, not the exam table. And so we see this bidirectional connectivity one more time at the item level. So at the project, the department, the room, and the item level, we have these unique identifiers that create this connectivity. If the planner chooses to make a change in the specification or the project warrants a change, that information would transport through the API back to the Anuma side, where those floor plans and those dimensional renderings would then indicate the change in the specification. What happens for the user within Atania is that once they've identified a particular product preference, they then have access to that technical detail. The documents themselves that we maintain and solicit from our manufacturers, whether they're brochures versus installation guides or the technical data sheets or cut sheets, are all available in PDF output, so the planner can output those. They can generate reports based on consolidated reportings across an entire project. We then extrapolate that information for both the utility, being the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. We also extrapolate the dimensional detail in particular. And those particular fields will be very important to the API, because that information is what allows us to modify and continue to update the rendering of the BIM objects in the BIM tools to make sure that we have the most accurate information. If the planner has not yet made a product selection, they will have what we call a design spec. So there will be typical dimensions attached to the generic or unspecified items until such time that a specific product is selected. At that time, your physical and utility document details would then update and would thus be communicated and transmitted through the API. So Kimon, I'm going to send it back over to you to show how that connectivity is going to appear over on the Anuma side.
Great, thank you very much. And one point we'd like to make as we switch over here is this connectivity that we created as part of the SEPS to BIM process with Atania. When Atania came into the discussions, obviously Atania is not a BIM application, but all the data in the background, if we're working with BIM, we realize that that's the type of data that's needed in BIM as you go into COBE and everything else. But your connection to BIM was done without even needing to know about BIM itself. In other words, even the BIM standards like IFC, which are important in the BIM world for sharing information, were not part of this connection that was needed. It was a very simple minimum connection with the IDs, and now your data is actually flowing into the different BIM applications. So if we open up Revit, for example, we can actually drill all the way back into the change that you made on that piece of equipment, that light. And that's actually pretty exciting, because from a designer's perspective, if I want to know about Atania, yes, I can have a medical planner that logs into Atania and sees it, but a designer, an architect might say, well, all I really need to know is the dimension of that light or that table and how does it fit in the room. And that's what we're going to show next. So the edits that Jill was making on the Atenia side, if I go live into a BIM application on the cloud, which happens in this particular case, I'm showing the Onuma system, which is the tool that we've developed. But the same functionality can happen with other applications as well. And I'm drilling right into the same room that Jill was looking at in the Atenia database. So this is live on the web in the cloud. There's that light fixture. And that light fixture, if I wanted to change the design, for example, I can go into edit mode and start moving things around. But the interesting thing is that I can actually drill into the data about that light fixture. So let's say I want to know, well, what's the manufacturer of that light fixture, and what's the cut sheet, and how big is it, and what type of electrical requirements does it have. If I click on this piece of equipment and pull up the attributes, so this is in Onuma now, I look at the attributes. The attributes that first come in at the top are the ones that came from the steps to BIM from VA. These are the requirements. This is the placeholder for what the cost of that fixture is, and the number of that fixture, and any other attributes that they would have from, and the GeoIDs that were mentioned. This Atenia data is streaming and live from the Atenia server through web services inside my view here. And the same would happen in Revit or Navisworks as another example. All these pieces start connecting together. And if I scroll down here, I can start seeing that Jill made a decision on the product, the manufacturer's mid-mark. So in real time, as she changes that data there, I would have it here, which allows me as a designer to start making decisions of how should I position this room. Do I need more space? Can I move more equipment to be closer to that piece of equipment? Do I need to make this room a little bit bigger? For example, if I make this room bigger, it triggers other things in the design. Obviously, in the early parts, I want to bump up this room and make it larger or move it over. It starts to shift even the floor plate of the building. So a lot of these early design decisions start affecting a lot of different stakeholders in the design. So I just increase the footprint of this room, and I'm going to increase the footprint of this building, and this whole building is all the data that came as a requirement from the steps to BIM process. This was an automatic generation of the rooms and spaces, and then a few minutes of moving them into positions. You see these other ones that are sitting on the side here. These are program requirements from the design, from VA in this case, that you move into the design. So that's the Atenia connection. Really exciting to have this connectivity, and the way that that works would work with other applications as well. It's not exclusive to any single application or single BIM application. In this case, we're showing it with Onuma, and the same thing would happen actually with, if I open it up now in an iPad app and zoom into that. So now I'm on an iPad looking at the exact same data, the exact same lamp here. Click the data button. The data button stream starts, it's hitting the Atenia server there, and there comes the Atenia data. So this is Atenia data of the attributes about the equipment, tons of attributes that may be relevant to me or not, depends on what you need to do, but this is another view of the same data that we looked at earlier. Okay, so let's go back to Keynote here. Okay, so next, last week we showed Revit, so for those that like to see this exact same workflow in Revit, you can watch last week's webinar. It's recorded, and we'll send you a link after this session is recorded as well. Matt Anderle showed the workflow in much more detail about how Revit works with the same data. He talked about how they used to have to do it, manually transferring data from libraries into databases, into Excel files, into Revit, trying to create schedules, and the inconsistencies between the standards create just chaos in many different formats. And now with this consistency coming from steps to BIM, they're able to manage that in a much more consistent way in their models. Cindy Hoagland from Trimble SketchUp is going to be on the webinar next week, but the work that we did with SketchUp is a similar type of a process. They also align their object databases with the 1691 data, and if you open it up in SketchUp, it actually pulls it live from 3D Warehouse. We showed this live last week as well. Essentially the same object data. So the point here is no matter what tool you're using, the owner's data is flowing into it. And then the same thing with ArchiCAD. So we started with Revit last week. Now we're in ArchiCAD, exact same room with exact same objects in ArchiCAD with the exact same layout of the spaces on the side that still need designing, but they're all lined up, ready to go, so the designer does not have to manually put this data in. And in this workflow, essentially, you're cutting across multiple applications, streaming and Atenia data into the applications that can read from it, and then being able to make design decisions with that. So pretty exciting. This is unprecedented, we think, as far as workflows, and it's all driven from the owner declaring what their data is and actually looking for solutions in industry. As part of the strategic plan that we worked with the National Institute of Building Sciences on with VA and DoD, they are looking for the vendor solutions out there that can do these types of things now that their data is out there. And extending that even further, when you get into manufacturing and actual products, Mike now from Foxblocks is now going to talk about what they do and what the opportunities that they see with this new workflow. Mike, are you ready?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Kimon. So briefly, my name's Mike Cannon. I'm with Foxblocks. We are a construction product manufacturer out of Omaha, Nebraska, and we appreciate the opportunity to contribute today. So this afternoon we'll talk a little bit about our high-performance wall system, and then we'll move to why we feel information technology and program to BIM is a tremendous opportunity for all who choose to invest and be involved early in the project pre-design phase with owners and design teams. Foxblocks is a insulated concrete form used for below grade and above grade wall construction, currently up to 22 stories in height. Our product is a 5-in-1 system. The product is the form for the concrete, has rebar cradles for proper placement. The insulation stays in place, the form itself, providing continuous exterior and interior insulation. The through form ties, after the concrete is placed, are used for interior and exterior attachment, so there's no need for additional steel studs. And lastly, the continuous insulation eliminates the need for conventional building wraps. So what we are doing is incorporating 5 steps into one. We have a modular product that once we're able to determine the perimeter length, the number of corners, types of corners, and intersection heights of walls, we can quickly provide an estimate of product needs, labor rates, and an estimate of installation times. So for us, having early site information, as was previously shown by Kimon, this will allow us to collaborate early and to incorporate design and cost savings benefits for the designers and owners. Foxblocks meets code requirements for continuous exterior insulation, providing high STC and fire ratings. Next slide, please. Are a solid choice for specification requirements, looking for where requirements for resilience or fortified construction is required. Next slide. And with the insulation R value that we provide of up to R31, we contribute to long-term life cycle energy savings, net zero construction, and LEED certification. Successful executed projects have included Department of Defense barracks, schools, command centers, FEMA shelters, other hospitality, worship, and multiple residential projects. So currently, what are we doing? We are investing in a robust BIM offering in multiple formats that include Revit and SketchUp. We're working with a new Revit system family assembler called BIM Smith Forge from Angularis, utilizing the Autodesk tools. This new configurator will enable designers to gather product data in a single interface with complete Revit assemblies, cut sheets, and specifications. Next slide, please. And then next. We've made the decision that we'll be hosting our content with the world leader BIM Object so that our information is widely accessible for customers 24/7, 365. What we're looking to achieve is to have specific data, product information in the right place and at the right time. We at Foxbox believe that construction, design, operation, and facility management is due for a major technology advancement by improving old-age building processes while maintaining the core knowledge and expertise that is proven and successful. We feel partnering with innovative industry leaders will enable this by providing information in a mobile, user-friendly, and interactive manner. So for a quick summary, Foxbox, at this point, we're committed. We've taken the time and looking at the BIM industry, the BIM products, and what's available, and have now decided that through technology that we can identify opportunities to partner earlier in the decision design process by making our comprehensive product and service information readily available. In doing so, we feel we can participate with improved design, construction, material supply planning, scheduling, delivery, and maximizing construction schedule compression as a business partner, not just a material supplier. We feel that now is the time to move forward, and we feel that this is a tremendous opportunity to add value and new services to the design and owner team. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike. That was great. So just one question before you go is the edits that you were seeing earlier that we were changing the size of the space that changed the floor slab. And if Foxbox was in there earlier on and could see this happening, then you could provide guidance to the design team of options of using your product is one potential you could see.
Absolutely. For us, what we see, Kimona, in going forward is that the earlier and sooner we can see adjustments or changes, we will then be able to provide recommendations on design efficiencies that will not only reduce the cost, reduce the labor, but be really a key partner in the early design process. So the sooner that we're involved, the better for us, and I think the better for the whole design team and ultimately the owner. Absolutely.
Great. Definitely. And the access that you saw, in fact, if we replace the Catania demonstration with live access to data, and you were reading the data from the BIM as it was changing size and the perimeter of the slab, for example, or the linear dimensions of just the shape of that slab, I imagine would trigger a design option from Foxbox and saying, here is the perimeter wall system or the foundation or requirements for that building. I could see that pretty easily, and I think that extends to other types of manufacturers as well. As we start plugging these pieces, these Lego pieces together, the opportunities are just endless as long as we can generate value and benefits for these owners that now are putting their data out there in a consistent format. We just have to keep on encouraging the owners to do that more. Okay, so we're getting ready toward the end here. I think we were running a little bit long, so we're not going to have a long group discussion here, but then I've talked to each one of you individually as we went along here. But is there any other final statement you'd like to say now that we've heard from each other? Any one of you? Doug, since you started off here, is there anything else that you'd like to add to what you just saw?
Well, first of all, I enjoyed everyone's presentation, and again, I want to thank you, Kimon, for inviting us to be part of this. No, there's really not much more to add. I think that everything's been said as it relates to BIM Object. We're very proud to have Foxbox as a partner, also, and a new partner in BIM Object. So, anybody needs to reach out. You can reach me on LinkedIn or through my email if you have any questions going forward.
Great. Great. Thanks, Doug. And Jill, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say that, once again, I think we're all reiterating the excitement that we have about the possibilities of being able to integrate what have historically been very disparate systems. So for us, moving into that 3D world with the BIM rendering is very exciting to our community, and also continuing to seek out the best solution for that life cycle. We all know that the end product is being able to hand off a comprehensive document and or file to our customers when that building is complete, and that's, I think, something we're moving towards, of getting better information, so that clinical engineering in particular isn't trying to rebuild data for a brand new facility, that we can hand that information over and be confident that it's accurate and complete.
Great. Thanks, Jill. So in closing here, and before we take questions from the audience, actually, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, if you have questions, type them into the question box on the GoToWebinar. We're not opening up the microphones. There's too many people online, so that wouldn't work. So type them in, and if we don't get to your questions today, we'll get back to you through email. So next steps, as far as getting beyond this BIM babble that we talked about, there's so much low-hanging fruit out there and so many opportunities that we need to work together on. We don't want to reinvent the wheel and create these center of the universe type approaches. There's value and benefit now, and there's a smarter way of doing things. We can work with owner data like this. We have to encourage other owners to do the same. It's not that difficult. The starting point to at least say, well, get the authoritative source of information somewhere. Just even park it on a Google Docs. But if you have requirement data, don't put it in a format that we can't work with. So share resources with other. Look at open standards and what the Building Smart Alliance and standards organizations are doing, and I encourage you to join them as well. Join our other webinars. We're going to be having a live workshop. It's called BIM Storm. We've had these for many years now with thousands of participants. It's free to join, and you can actually start working with these actual clinic data models and sample files, and different vendors are going to be in there. So please sign up. We're going to be starting these up over the next few months, culminating in the BIM Storm at the National Academies in Washington, D.C. in October. Please join us there. Next week's webinar is going to be getting more technical about the IT approaches to this. We've already touched on some of that today, but it's also more of a strategic way of how do you deal with all this data now from a CIO's perspective in an organization, a manufacturer, or an owner. We want to talk about that. And maybe, Mike, you can actually introduce the session you'll be having at the federal facilities next week as well. We decided not only to go to webinar and broadcast it, but have a live event there. Mike, are you online?
Yes, thanks. We are going to be having an in-person viewing of Webinar 4 at the Federal Facilities Council headquarters in Washington, D.C. And then we're going to be following that up with a discussion of what kind of policies are necessary in order for federal agencies to be able to implement what we're talking about here. All of the steps are in place, but a policy needs to be established for them to be able to move forward. And you can contact us through ONUMA or through BIM Storm to find out if you're in DC and want to be there in person. And so we've got just enough time to do a lightning round of some questions that have come in. So please, just phrases, not even full sentences, would be good. To start, Kimon Carl Broyles is asking about Bentley involvement.
We'd love to have Bentley involved. We have, in the past, in previous BIM storms, we've had Bentley involvement, and it would be great if anybody has connections to Bentley to get, and anybody's welcome to join in. The more, the merrier, actually.
Okay, very good. So, Carl, bug the people at Bentley to contact ONUMA. Very quickly, Mike Kana, what are the things that a manufacturer has to be thinking about in order to start getting their information configured for use in this manner? You've just done this, and maybe you can quickly share some insights.
Yeah, what we've seen and determined is that we need to go ahead and get our specific product data in place. We need to move to making sure that the file size of all the information is going to be usable for everybody, and then identifying the different formats that the potential users are going to go ahead and access to. Once we arrived at that point, then it was really identifying which platform or which company we were going to work with to develop the work in Revit and SketchUp for our product and its specific data details, and then really for us where we were going to go ahead and host it so that we can make sure that the product's available.
So there's some work to do to get your house in order.
Absolutely.
John, what can you do to help manufacturers get information in order? Quick lightning round here.
Sorry, Mike, was that question for Doug?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you you broke up just a little bit.
Okay, what can BIM Object do to help manufacturers get their data in order for use in BIM?
Well, first thing that we can do is our analytical database can tell us by country what platforms the designers and other users are downloading the objects in, whether they're SketchUp, Revit, or ArchiCAD. I have that data for the United States that I use in presentations all the time. And as you know, as Mike Keenan has done very astutely, is analyzed what is needed, what is needed and wanted by the designers and the buyers, and which objects which object platforms need to be available to them. So BIM object is we do what I like to say we do a lot of consultative work with manufacturers. I'm very sensitive to that, having been a manufacturer myself. That someone's telling me what is BIM all about? Again, take the babble out of BIM. So I think we can be a player in there with the rest of this team and helping take the babble out of BIM and help you make good decisions.
Okay, Jill, this gives you the last minute. What is one of the first things you do when you're working with manufacturers to help them get their data in order?
We talk about normalization of the data. It really comes down to having the data manageable. So we talk to them about our standards, how we do normalize it to make sure that the data we do solicit from them can very quickly be translated, normalized, and entered into our catalog.
And that has proven to be effective through your exercises with Kimon. So that wraps up the questions. Kimon, that's to you now.
Thank you, everybody. This has been great. And thanks for helping us cut through the babble like we've been talking about. I think there's just huge opportunities here, and I think the industry, if we work together on this, we can actually push this over the hump here. So join us next week on the web and live in DC. If you'd like to be there, send us a note. Sign up and look for the BIM Storm. Sign up for the BIM Storm. There's a separate sign up. If you go to bimstorm.com/BIE, you'll have information there on how you can actually get your hands directly on this, which will help answer a lot of the questions that have been coming in as well too. Thank you very much, and we'll be signing off.